Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you so much for listening. And on the other end of the tin can and string, we have our analyst and co-host. He is a veteran of many blogs, many shows. Please welcome Arif Hassan, Mr. Useful Human. How are you tonight?
Many shows, so many shows, beautiful shows.
So many shows, beautiful shows, the best of shows. And joining us tonight for a special 3-man pod all the way from Denver, Colorado, Dusty O'Connell. Dusty, how are you?
Hello. I was just telling Arif during the pre-show that I watched War for the Planet of the Apes with Korean subtitles tonight, which made the film unnecessarily confusing because most of the apes don't speak, they sign. And so I had no idea what they were signing to each other or to Caesar for most of the film, but I was still able to enjoy it.
That sounds like a situation where you had like an edible that was too powerful, and it just sounds like everyone's speaking in a different language.
It's either too powerful or not powerful enough.
Is that the situation? Is that the America that
the
we're in?
The world is frustratingly comprehensible.
That's actually my first thought whenever I wake up in the morning and I have to go to work. This day is too frustratingly comprehensible.
All I know is that I hate every ape I see, from chimpanzee to chimpanzee.
Oh my god.
Or they've finally made a monkey out of me.
Oh yes. They finally made a monkey out of Dusty. So, welcome to the episode, special 3-man pod edition, talking about the victory over the Bears in Chicago.
Are you doing air quotes around victory there? Because that was...
It went in the victory column. It went in the win column. The Bears are convinced that they beat themselves, but that is not what is reflected in the standings. So
a win is a win, except when the Vikings do it.
There may be some truth to that. But we will be going over that. We have some league news to get through, and we have a nice big mailbag to sift through. But before we begin the show, we would just like to mention that we appreciate all of the support you guys have given us over the last few years. We certainly appreciate it here at Norse Code. We are ad-free. We are supported by you, the listener. We could not do this show without you. It would sound terrible. We would not have the equipment we have. We would not be going to London this year without your guys' help. So again, thank you so much. If you would like to support the show, you can do it in a couple of different ways. You can, the easiest, the cheapest way to do it is to go on iTunes and give us 5 stars on the review. It'll help us move up the charts a little bit, help get a little bit of exposure. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode and give a donation there. That's just a one-time donation. Or you can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and you can give money there like it's a sustaining thing, like an NPR pledge drive. So most people give something like a tree fitty to help keep the Loch Ness Monster at bay. We appreciate anything you're willing to give, whether it's $1 or thousands and thousands of dollars. We're willing to do lots and lots of things for thousands and thousands of dollars, as Dusty has shown time and time again. But
what does that even mean?
You know what it means.
You know what you said.
I will interject and say that there is one specific thing that I'm willing to do for anyone that contributes $5, either once or on a recurring basis, and that is to send you one of our sweet Norse Code stickers.
This is true. And pay attention on Twitter because we have given out a couple of bumper stickers this season. So pay attention there. You can follow us on Twitter. We have all our information at the end of the show, so we can get into the real reason why you're listening to it, is to hear our takes on Adrian Peterson going to Arizona. Gut laughing may start now.
I'm excited to see 2 2,000-yard rushers on the same team.
And which years did they rush for 2,000 yards?
Well, each of them at least 5 years ago.
You're like, my kid's going to be 5 in December, and that was he got the 2,000 yard mark the day after he was born. So, yeah, that's about 5 years.
The combined ages of the running back core in Arizona are now eligible for Medicare.
One of my favorite tweets about this so far was one of our listeners who said they can't wait for the Adrian just says stupid things conversation that we'll have later when he just burns and leaves New Orleans for dead. About how he
yeah, I can't wait for
that edition of the show.
Yes, that's going to be amazing.
So my the thing that I found most interesting about the Adrian Peterson trade is that I don't know if this was like part of his plan, but by being traded to Arizona when he is likely to become the first NFL player to play in 2 games in London in one season.
Whoa.
Even Blake Bortles hasn't ever done that. I feel like Bortles should try.
Yeah, he really needs it, actually. This is kind of like how Randy Moss is the only player, I think, to play 3 back-to-back Monday night games.
Yeah.
Which, good job, dude.
He just wanted it so badly. I'm sure he planned it that way.
Do these things only happen to players at the end of their career? Is that...
I mean, I guess once you're playing hot potato with a functionally discarded commodity, then all sorts of statistical anomalies appear, it would seem.
Yeah, this sure as hell doesn't happen at the beginning of the year. Or the beginning of
I still love that, like, Randy Moss is the answer to the trivia question, who caught Brett Favre's 500th touchdown? What?
And I suppose could be the answer to the question, who has thrown a touchdown or who has thrown a pass to Brett Favre?
That got called back.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who threw an actual pass to Brett Favre.
So 2 people have thrown passes to Brett Favre. One is Randy Moss. The other one is Brett Favre.
The other one is Brett Favre, yeah.
Okay, but so really, snark aside, what is going to be the functional difference Adrian's role in Arizona than in New Orleans? Like, okay, so obviously New Orleans has a rookie, I think, or a second year guy that is much younger and more dynamic. And Mark Ingram was, I guess, always expecting to get the majority of carries in New Orleans. But I mean, is Adrian Peterson going to walk into the role that he envisions himself having? Like, is he going to be 2008 Adrian Peterson again in Arizona, or is it going to be 14 touches a game until he gets frustrated and stops playing altogether?
I mean, it's going to be the Adrian Peterson that showed up for the Saints. I think the offense is probably going to be a better fit. I'm actually looking up how many runs from shotgun each of the two offenses has, just to get a better read on it. But Arizona, yeah, this is what I thought. Arizona has the fewest percentage of runs from shotgun this year, whereas New Orleans last year anyway was a little bit up. This year they're a little bit down. But yeah, just generally speaking, the amount of runs from shotgun are half as many for Arizona as they were for New Orleans. And so that alone is like enough of a schematic change that, he could be a better fit. And then you're right. Like in New Orleans, Adrian Peterson joined a running back core that was replete with talent. It had Mark Ingram. It had, a 3rd round pick. It had, some exciting players that they ended up putting on the practice squad and cutting that turns out are better than Adrian Peterson. Arizona right now is struggling. They've kind of resisted giving Andre Ellington the ball. So much so that they signed Chris Johnson again after David Johnson went down. So they need a running back more, but it's not as if that'll make Adrian Peterson better. All it does is it just makes the move make more sense for Arizona than it did for New Orleans. That's all it does. It's a better fit, I guess, but I don't expect him to average more than 3 yards a carry again, like he did for New Orleans. And I don't expect him to be spectacularly efficient in any way. I mean, like, they do ask the running backs to do a little bit less when it's not David Johnson on the field. But, they still do catch passes and stuff. So, yeah, whatever.
I like the caveat in the article in the ESPN article about the Adrian Peterson trade, where they actually included that he's averaging about 3 yards a carry in incredibly limited exposure or incredibly limited reps.
Oh, that's nice of them.
Like, well, he's averaging about 3 yards a carry, but don't get excited about that. Dial back the enthusiasm just a hair. So that's a damn shame that he's no longer going to be outrushed by the quarterback on his own team. But oh well.
This does make me technically correct. Adrian Peterson.
That's kind of correct.
Traded to one of several teams, including. To one of potential several teams, including Arizona.
There's a long burn on that tweet. A real long burn.
That's true. If you put that in an "I told you so" cellar, it would be very finely aged by now.
All right, enough of this nonsense. Let's talk about the game. We won.
Some other nonsense.
Yeah, other nonsense. We won in Chicago. We snapped our losing streak of division rivals and away games.
Well, so the losing streak was not that bad. It was bad as far as the Bears are concerned. This is only the second out of the last 10 meetings at Soldier Field where we were able to peel one away. But
also the second out of the last 3. So. Yeah, things are looking up, Dusty.
Yeah, that's true. But the thing about Soldier Field is that it cares for no man, and there's always an iron price to be paid.
Soldier Field is a harsh mistress.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's very fair. And this game was really a tale of two different quarterbacks. So we found out that Bradford shouldn't be playing for us right now. And we had Case Keenum, who looked efficient. So the first thing that we should talk about is Bradford, the decision to start him and the decision to pull him, and should he have been pulled earlier than he was? What do you think, Arif?
Yeah, no, I think it became clear sort of immediately, right, that Sam Bradford wasn't playing to anything resembling his ability. And, some people were asking, is this rust? And I think it was pretty clear that he was hampered by his injury. There's a deep pass to Diggs, the one that was like only a little underthrown, according to McDonough, that is really emblematic of it. He ends the throw on his tiptoes, which I've never seen a quarterback do. But is probably indicative of the fact that his form is so screwed up from how his knee is just not ready to play. So I don't think he should have been playing to start with. I'm kind of surprised that throughout the week that the Vikings, were exposed to this in practice, because he took a bunch of reps in practice, limited reps, and it didn't reveal itself or something.
Maybe he watched a lot of T-Jack video and just thought, well, I can't do the jump.
I can't jump, right?
But I can do the tiptoes. He was a success in Minnesota. It'll be fine.
Well, no. So Dr. David Chow on Twitter was like, Bradford's short passes are sailing and his long passes are being underthrown because he's basically not using his front foot. His injured leg.
Right.
Is the one that he would use for accuracy. And since he apparently never really put much weight on it, he just simply was not able to pass like an NFL quarterback should.
Yeah. And I think that if you just so Chow looks at it from a medical perspective, this is what this is symptomatic of. If you just take a look at him throwing, it also looks like he's just not putting, weight down on his front foot. And, that you can't play a quarterback who relies on, he traditionally has pretty good, a throwing motion with pretty good form that, drives kinetic energy up through the ground through the ball. That's just a classic quarterback throwing motion. You can't put that quarterback in if he can't drive off the ball. He should have never been playing, and it became clear, after the third drive, I think, before he ever took one sack. after the third drive, he should have just been pulled. Some people on Twitter were saying, that's negligent, and that sounds pretty strong, but it kind of feels true that, Sam Bradford was at risk. Now, you take a look at what the Vikings did something pretty unusual today. They had a certified athletic trainer and director of sports medicine, Eric Sugarman, do one of the pressers. And so they were able to ask him a lot of questions, and he was out there and he said, before any question was asked, he said, we would never put a player out there that was unable to protect themselves. And we ended up pulling Bradford because, the re-aggravation of his injury made it to the point where he could no longer protect himself. And he also clarified, that there's no direct contact bone bruise, which I'm a little curious about. So there's a lot of things that are really curious about what Sugarman said. So let me find the quote real quick. Well, I always come super prepared.
Yeah, when he mentioned could no longer protect himself, that sounded like an MMA ref at that point. Like that's usually when a fight stops in MMA, is when you can't protect yourself any further.
Right. Yeah. It does sound a lot like that. I think that's
Bradford was curled up, taking lots and lots of knees, and couldn't defend himself. It was time to be done.
Well, no, but that makes perfect sense because we all saw the play where he basically sacked himself.
Yeah,
you could tell that he was trying to favor that leg, and there was just, it was either step on his injured leg and potentially, ruin his knee forever, or fall down.
Watching that was you need to come out of this game now. You just sacked yourself. Like, it was time. And then he played one more play after that. It's like, really?
Yeah, that was brutal.
What about that play inspired you to continue? Like, it's
so,
okay to be done after that.
Yeah, no, and that I think is on the coaches. So there are a couple of things that kind of stick out from the Sugarman presser. So he says, we're not dealing with a ligament injury with Sam. We're not dealing with a bone bruise from a direct hit. Sam has wear and tear in his knee joint, and these injuries are very difficult to manage and treat. And that, I think brings up a whole new set of questions. One, why was it reported that he had a bone bruise? Does he have a bone bruise from a not direct hit? Is it bone-to-bone contact? Is it because he's lost cartilage in his knee? Because that would be a bone bruise from a non-direct hit, right? Or not a direct hit. And the reporters, they're there, they can pick up on nuance. They asked that question, and I'm trying to I've direct messaged a couple of the people who were at the presser, and I wanted to ask sort of what his tone was in the answer, because his answer is not super satisfactory, I think. Let me pull that up too, because they ask, you say, it was not a direct impact bone bruise. Is there a different kind of bone bruise? Answer: no, it was not a direct. What? So, that doesn't tell me anything, and I think that's an answer that's kind of tone dependent, and so I'm kind of asking around to see who picked up on his tone. But yeah, so there are some serious questions about how could he have been game ready? B, what's the long term prognosis or anything like that? And C, who is the most liable for this decision to put him in the game? Sugarman says he was not more likely to injure himself in this game than he was sort of in the next 6 weeks or whatever, or he was not at a greater risk to injure himself in this game or something like that, which I find difficult to believe. But, that's their opinion from a medical standpoint. And he also mentioned that, it's very difficult to replicate game speed for medical staff. And so a lot of the things that they end up making decisions on will always be as a result of incomplete information. So yeah, it's difficult to sort of deal with this, but I think that the coaches could see, how he was driving his passes, how his throws were going. And even if maybe it should have been somewhat clear that they shouldn't have played him before the game started, I thought it was clear before he ever took a sack, which I think the first sack was the safety.
Yes.
Before he ever took a sack, that he shouldn't have been in the game. And that's when they really should have made that decision for sure.
Yeah, it was a bit of a mess out there, and just watching it was painful. You knew that they announced that Keenum was starting to warm up. As soon as that was said, it was like, okay, good. At least someone has a bit of sanity out there that realizes that this experiment needs to end and end quickly. So moving forward for the next few games, do you keep Bradford active but bump him down to number 2? Do you then also activate Dusty's favorite quarterback in the league?
Kyle Sluter?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I was like, Blake Bell? Jerick McKinnon?
No. I remember specifically Dusty fawning over during the last 3-man pod. Dusty fawning over Slater.
Kid's got a rocket and a handsome face.
He's got a laser rocket arm. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried stowing him for a little bit because they've already created kind of the room for them to be able to make that decision by saying he re-aggravated the injury and not we were wrong, right? So they can say, well, now there's more swelling, or there's more whatever as a result of that 4th sack where he got up clearly limping. I mean, he was definitely limping more after the one where, Elflin, basically bumped into him and he curled up. He was limping more after that than he was before, even though he was still kind of walking around gingerly before. I wouldn't be surprised if they stowed him for a little bit. And that's going to make it difficult for him to be ready to play. Case Keenum has been playing adequately, I think, above the level you'd expect a backup quarterback to play, I think, by any reasonable stretch of the imagination. In this game, he had 110 passer rating. Actually, it's kind of funny. I mean, this is more a quirk of the way passer rating is calculated, which is not intelligently. But, Bradford's passer rating was half that of Case Keenum's. He had a 53.6 passer rating. Case Keenum had a 110.3. I don't think he played as well as a quarterback that has that passer rating. But, the difference became clear as soon as Keenum stepped into the game. Keenum by no means is an athletic or mobile quarterback, but he certainly looked quite spry compared to the example set by Bradford. He was able to move around. They had rollouts. He ran the ball once for 22 yards somehow. It was pretty obvious that, he was able to avoid pressure, even if he's worse at sensing pressure than Bradford is. Passer rating is a statistic that doesn't even account for sack yardage. Bradford had 1 net passing yard after accounting for sacks. The difference became obvious, and it was nice to see Case Keenum play as well as he did. Now, he didn't throw a pass over 20 yards. So the fact that he was stunningly accurate, he had 17 completions on 21 attempts, and 2 of those misses were drops. So he was accurate, but he wasn't required to do too much. And it helps that the Bears linebacker core was devastated and they were able to exploit the middle of the field.
It certainly helps there. The Bradford injury is basically what we all feared last year. And we made it through the entirety of last year going, oh God, we dodged a bullet. Maybe his legs will be okay. Maybe his knee is going to completely stay together and we won't have to worry about a week-to-week thing. Oh, all right, 2017 season, great. We got the optimism up. We're ready to go. Looks good in camp, good. Oh, week 1, holy crap, is he just looking fantastic? Oh, that's right. We had this worry last year. The killer in the horror film never really died. He was just hiding.
Yeah. There was I was talking to someone a little bit familiar with athletic medicine. And they were saying, there is a chance that despite the 2 ACLs that, I was talking to him after the 2016 season, despite the 2 ACLs, that Bradford may not be at an enormous risk of re-injury. He's always going to be at a higher risk of re-injury than an athlete who's never had a knee injury for, a number of reasons. But he may not be at an enormous risk of re-injury because the reason he tore the second ACL is because, and this might sound haunting, he got rushed back too soon. The funny thing with ACL tears and with a lot of injuries is that you can look like you're at your athletic peak again, and your ligament is still not ready to handle the wear and tear of a football game for a number of weeks, because it turns out being able to run a short shuttle or a 3-cone is a little bit different than attempting to evade a defender who will nevertheless hit you with 280 pounds and a 4.5 40 or something like that, right? It's a lot different. the ability to withstand contact and a direct hit is something that you can't test because you're not committing medical malpractice. And so you just have to wait for it to heal, even as the player feels healthy, which is actually one of my biggest concerns about Teddy Bridgewater, is that the first couple of weeks back, you're at an enormous risk of re-injury because the player will feel fine, he will test fine, he will look fine, and he'll have structural weakness. And so, and that's just an aside. I was talking to this guy, and he was like, in Bradford, it seems like it's fully healed and his ligament is structurally sound, so he may be at less of a risk of re-injury. And so I was like, okay, cool. Maybe, the fact that he, survived the entire 2016 is an actual indication that he's not at substantial risk of re-injury. And while that could still be true, it certainly doesn't feel true after he has been re-injured. So this is the thing we were worried about. It came to pass, and it really puts a dent in any ability for Bradford's agent to negotiate a contract extension with the Vikings.
Okay, so here's my question. Does this influence, or does this make you feel worse about training staff or medical staff assessments about Teddy Bridgewater, given that Sam Bradford was, allowed to start and left in the game when it was pretty obvious that he had no business being there in the first place?
I am a little bit worried, and it's difficult to kind of like the 538 problem, right? When they predict something is going to happen 80% of the time, 4 out of 5 times they're going to look like geniuses, and the other time, even though they predicted correctly, the other thing happened 20% of the time. And it's difficult here to do that too, right? Because the medical staff might just think, hey, he's not at any more substantial risk of re-injury than if we had just waited 6 weeks. He just happened to get re-injured, right? I don't know. And I'm worried that this is the same thing that's going to happen with Bridgewater. And, like most football players, and I don't blame Bradford for this, and I'm not going to blame Bridgewater for this, they're going to be chomping at the bit to play as soon as possible and get cleared to play when they feel like they can play, and certainly actually before they can feel like they can play. So, because they're A, inherently competitive people, and B, there's enormous pressures on you when you're this kind of quarterback or in any football position to play as soon as possible because availability is, really primary in the NFL. And so they're always going to try to play. And so it's on the coaching staff and the medical staff. And I am a little bit worried that the medical staff is going to play Teddy Bridgewater too soon, especially because what we're hearing right now is Teddy is coming back sooner than anticipated. If that's not like kind of a warning or a red flag, given all the things that we just talked about, then, I don't know what is. So I am worried about the medical staff's ability to accurately assess whether or not Bridgewater should play. I would be fine waiting until week 11 or whatever. Before Bridgewater can play, even if he's off the PUP list, has practiced for 3 weeks, has been put on the active roster, and is practicing with the team, would still like to just wait because even if the season might be lost, I mean, A, no one should be losing their jobs for the season because this is a pretty unanticipated set of events. But B, it's good for the long-term health of the team to have Bridgewater as healthy as possible.
So we got a question in from the mailbag, and I'm just going to move it up here because it's fitting. Roshu Low asks, was signing Keenum a calculated move, meaning Spielman seeing other potential quarterback controversy, or that Sam wouldn't hold up? Basically asking, did he hedge his bet on this?
I don't think it was a calculated move in the sense that he spent more for a backup quarterback, anticipating that Bradford was more likely to get injured this year. I think he signed a backup quarterback because you should sign up backup quarterbacks. They got one of the better ones on the market because they negotiated better. I don't think it was because, there was some sort of sixth sense about, Bradford being substantially more likely to be injured this season. Because it's not like, the Vikings were, going hog wild trying to replace Sean Hill last year. I think signing Case Keenum was, hey, Sean Hill's pretty old. We probably should get a younger backup quarterback in here. And it turns out you got one of the better ones. And,
considering the game he had against Tampa Bay and how Jared Goff is doing, it turns out the two best quarterbacks in the league were fighting for the starting job.
Yeah, right. Who knew that the LA Rams quarterback job was going to be a replication of the Joe Montana Steve Young problem.
Exactly. So let's talk about Case Keenum and Jerick McKinnon for a moment. Keenum was efficient He did very well, and it seemed like after Bradford went out, Jerick McKinnon stepped in and handled a lot of the work. In fact, I believe most of the offensive yards could be pointed directly at Jerick McKinnon.
Yeah, he had 146 offensive yards. The Vikings overall had 300, and so he is almost exactly half of the offensive yardage. And if you include yards after contact, then I think he is singularly responsible for more than half of the total offensive yards. McKinnon was pretty spectacular in the game. One kind of interesting statistic from the game, from the folks at Pro Football Focus, is that neither McKinnon nor Latavius Murray broke any tackles. So they have 0 forced missed tackles, which I find kind of funny, and could speak, longer term to, McKinnon's ability to replicate this kind of performance. But he did have, 2.8 yards after contact per attempt, which is among the higher yards after contact per attempt in the NFL if you exclude Kareem Hunt. It was a good performance, and he demonstrated kind of a lot of things that you want from a running back, especially one with his dynamic athletic skill set. He showed creativity, something that I've always been worried about whether or not he had the ability to do so. Turning a broken play into a very good play. He showed a little bit of power. That yards after contact statistic kind of helps demonstrate that, and he showed pretty good speed. He didn't end up sort of in the next gen stats, top speed for week 5 or anything like that. I guess that was Leonard Fournette, but I don't think he even appeared in the top 20. In fact, Stephon Diggs ended up with a higher max speed than Jerick McKinnon. But he showed really good speed. He was able to split those defenders on the 58-yard touchdown run, and he showed pretty decent hands. What I find funny is that Jerick McKinnon has never had a fumble with the Vikings as a running back, but he's had 2 fumbles now, once as a quarterback and once as a kick returner. And I'm kind of wondering how to evaluate that, because as a runner, he's showing really good instincts with the ball. When he runs to the outside, he always switches the ball to his outside arm, which is kind of one of those smaller things that a lot of young running backs don't do. I don't know. He looked really good, both as a pass catcher and as a runner. And it was very clear that he was doing more than just what his offensive line was giving him, because I didn't think that offensive line was run blocking very spectacularly.
Talk about the difference between the way Latavius Murray was playing and McKinnon was playing, because it really seemed like McKinnon took this moment and went, no, I'm going to be running back 1 for the rest of the year.
Yeah, it seemed so. He certainly took advantage of what was an open job, and Latavius Murray, started the game, and people expect him to be, the starting running back. He's getting $5 million from the Vikings, which is kind of starting, running back money. As an aside, some people were like, well, Arif, don't think of him as a backup. They paid him to be a starter until Dalvin Cook fell, and I actually don't believe that that's true. I think the Vikings were always aiming for a running back in the draft. That one fell so that they would take one in the second round is really nice, but I think they would have gone after, someone like a Donta Foreman or a Kareem Hunt or something sort of in the middle rounds. I think McKinnon really took advantage. And we saw, some of those differences. Murray is not the running back that tested, I think he ran a 4.37 at the combine. He's not running that fast, but he is really shifty. I'm really surprised, at how he was able to play. Now, he ended up with, I think, 2.6 yards per carry. And so, praising him seems to be incorrect, but I actually think that he played pretty well, given the down and distance and given the situations he was in. He doesn't seem to have that much burst. He always looks way too tall as a running back, and that's actually one of his problems because he doesn't lower his pads and generate more power. But I thought he actually did a pretty decent job with what he was given. I think the biggest difference between the two, aside from sort of their athletic skill sets, is that McKinnon is more creative. He can create plays when the play design fails. Latavius Murray does not do that. He will run the play as blocked to get maybe a couple more yards than what's blocked, and that's it. And so if the offensive line in front of him is failing, he's not going to be able to generate additional yards kind of out of thin air, like some other running backs have the ability to do. And I think that's maybe the biggest difference in terms of running style. The athletic differences are obviously huge, and obviously the fact that you probably want McKinnon running more often to the outside and Latavius Murray running more often to the inside, that plays a pretty substantial role as well.
So there's not much more to talk about for the offense. There wasn't much there, really, other than the fact that we went to the half leading 3-2, which has only happened a handful of times in the history of the NFL, really.
8 times. I looked it up.
Yeah. It was... somebody said it looked like a score when the Twins are playing the White Sox.
Yeah, right.
Like, aw.
Yeah, there's a couple of things worth mentioning. Stephon Diggs had a groin injury, which is one of the several reasons that he didn't get too many yards in the game. We don't know how long the groin injury is going to last. Groin injuries are things that tend to be recovered from quickly. I should avoid passive sentence construction, I guess. But players tend to recover quickly from groin injuries in terms of their ability to get back on the field, but it takes a couple of weeks before they get back up to the regular playing level. And so we're going to probably see Stephon Diggs active next week or at least the week after. But we're probably not going to see him playing at the same level for a couple of weeks because groin injuries just tend to linger like that. So, but it was good to see that the Vikings were finally willing to go to a tight end in a situation where the linebacker core that they were playing against was so depleted. They didn't do that against the Lions. They had a lot of opportunity. They didn't get enough tight end work in there. And in this case, they did. They were able to take advantage of it. So that was nice to see. So I kind of wanted to mention that. Also, Adam Thielen, 8 targets, only 5 catches. Only one of them was a drop, but that's a really difficult. I don't want to blame him for it because that was a very, very difficult ball to haul in. 34 yards. It's got to be maybe the lowest yards per reception that we've seen in Adam Thielen's career. I haven't looked that up, but I wouldn't be surprised. But those are just kind of the final offensive notes I wanted to put in there.
So let's go defense. And we can talk about Trey Waynes and his love of holding the jersey as somebody gets 10, 15 yards past the line of scrimmage. Boy, they just keep on picking on Trey Waynes, don't they?
They certainly do. I kind of want to look up real quick how many yards he gave up total, but I know that won't be accurate because, it doesn't include sort of the holding penalties that he received, and then also doesn't include catches that he's given up. I think he gave up a 25-yard pass that ended up getting called back because of a holding penalty on Tom Johnson. So it was immaterial to what Waynes was doing, and so whatever Pro Football Focus says the yardage is, I had like another 25 yards or 30 yards
like
to it.
30 to 40 yards additional would probably be about accurate. And on the other side, they didn't target Rhodes once during the entire game. That's something to be proud of.
And it's really kind of cool because if you take a look at, and I'll put it in the show notes, the next gen throwing chart for Mitch Trubisky, it's almost all to the right side of the field. And the Vikings, for the first time in a long time, played sides where Rhodes is on the left side, Trey Waynes is on the right side. Because who are you gonna follow? Like in Chicago, which receiver are you so scared that you're gonna move Xavier Rhodes around? This is the first time that we've seen that in a while. I remember way back when we were having conversations is Xavier Rhodes going to shout out? This would be the week to do it. Calvin Johnson's here, they wouldn't, right? And you'd be like, well, they still did a pretty good job, so I don't mind. And then he started shadowing receivers, and Odell Beckham gets 30 yards, and Antonio Brown gets 40 yards, and you're like, oh, wow, okay, this is certainly worth it. In this game, he did not shadow anyone, and no one was so overwhelmingly good that they were able to get open against him. And this is a product of a couple of things, and it's interesting to see people react to that image and come up with their own theories as to why Mitch Trubisky was really only throwing to the right. One argument is, of course, and I think this is naturally pretty true, why would you target your number 4 receiver against Xavier Rhodes? You're not going to do it. It doesn't matter who it is. So that's one of them. The other one is it's Trey Waynes. Why wouldn't you target Trey Waynes? You're going to do it. It doesn't matter if it's your number 3 receiver. So that's another argument. Another argument, I think that this one is pretty substantial, is how important rollouts are to the Chicago offense with Mitch Trubisky in there. Trubisky is obviously a very athletic quarterback. We saw him, do some pretty good work on the ground against the Vikings. I do want to quickly mention Danielle Hunter chasing him down with a bad angle. That was incredible. But for the most part, he's a pretty athletic quarterback. And so, rolling him out of the pocket is pretty smart, especially when your offensive line is getting injured, when your right tackle is Bobby Massey. You just want to get him out of the pocket and move him around and make him a threat to run. But it also does a couple of things. It makes the defense move more, but it makes defensive assignment a lot simpler and easier because they can only read half of the field. And also, Mitch Trubisky is more comfortable rolling out to the right than he is to the left. And so it's not all a product of Xavier Rhodes being good, Trey Waynes being bad, or anything in between. It also has to do with just you want to roll Trubisky to your right instead of your left because he's way more comfortable throwing to his right. Most quarterbacks are. So, yeah, I mean, there's a combination of things. But I don't want to take too much away from Xavier Rhodes giving up 0 yards on 0 targets with 0 completions, which is pretty cool. And then you compare that actually with Harrison Smith, who was targeted 4 times in coverage, only allowed 1 completion. That completion was for -3 yards. So congratulations, Dusty and James. You gave up more yards than Harrison Smith and Xavier Rhodes did in coverage.
I've done a lot of work to this moment. A lot of work for this moment. And he ended up icing the game with a pick.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. And he did it in man coverage. The thing I wasn't haranguing him about it or anything like that. But I was worried, right? Because, it seemed like he had improved in man coverage. And then all throughout training camp in the preseason, he was just getting toasted by like Michael Floyd and, Bucky Hodges and who's not even on the team anymore. And, other players just in man coverage. And you're like, well, he's not a man coverage guy. That's fine. He can do literally everything else. I don't care. But hopefully the Vikings don't rely on him too much in man coverage. And lo and behold, when they do, he gets the game-selling interception. So never mind.
Yeah. The other person I want to mention is Eric Kendricks and the Eric Kendricks experience, the roller coaster that we all went on this game. What's going on with him?
I'm not sure. I think that for the most part, he's playing a lot better than he did in the Detroit Lions game. I think if we erase the Lions game from our understanding of Eric Kendricks, he becomes a much more consistent player. So even in this game, he wasn't too much of a roller coaster compared to what he did in the Lions game. But, he bit too hard on play action a couple of times, especially sort of in that first drive, which is kind of frustrating because he's sort of the key to blocking up those passing lanes. And he missed a tackle here or there, but really, I think the bigger roller coaster is probably Andrew Sendejo, who had some really phenomenally good plays, especially in run defense, some really phenomenally bad plays, including deflecting a pass into the end zone. I don't know what you can do. Sendejo is like a guy that his average level of play is something that's pretty good, and so you'll take it. But you won't not be frustrated when those things happen, right? And so he'll overrun a play and miss a tackle, and there's like 20 yards of field out on the assigned defender, or he'll get his hand on the ball, and you're like, oh, that's excellent, and then like within a millisecond, it goes to the intended receiver, and you're like, wait, why even bother then? And it's a touchdown. I don't know, man. A lot of roller coasters.
A lot of roller coasters indeed. One quick question about Chicago and Chicago's defense was a question from Kenneth Allen, who asks, when the hell did Akeem Hicks get so good?
I kind of think he's always been pretty good. I think the Patriots made a mistake when they let him go. I think that for the most part, he's actually been pretty good for a while. I think he's had to deal with some injuries in his career. He's always been pretty good. He played at like a Pro Bowl level, so I'm not going to say I knew it all along. He's secretly a Pro Bowler. He played above, his level of play. But he's always been pretty good. He got some pretty good ones on Berger. He got some pretty good ones on Easton. Berger's been having kind of an up and down year. He had a pretty good game against the Lions. He had a pretty poor game, I would argue, against the Bears. And some pretty poor games. I think he had an awful game against the Steelers. Who didn't, though? And he had some trouble against the Bucs too. So he's been up and down. So for him to have a really good game against Joe Berger, that's not extraordinarily surprising. Elflein had a pretty troublesome game. Easton had a pretty troublesome game. So I think it's a combination of Hicks being a fairly good player and that interior being still pretty rough.
You're not going to do an I told you so on this. You'll do it on other things like, the Adrian Peterson trade a year later.
Right. Well, it's not like I'm on record saying Akeem Hicks is amazing. Like it's a difficult I told you so.
Yeah, it's not like you wrote a article saying Akeem Hicks is a bad football player or something, or is bad at football.
Right.
That would, Lord knows you don't want to do that again. So before we get into the mailbag, Arif, Dusty, and I have something we would like to share with you that we had far too much fun with. Dusty, why don't you help explain what this is?
Oh, so a tweet went out. So, of course, the Miami Dolphins managed to win a game despite the functional total lack of effort on the part of their quote-unquote quarterback, Jay Cutler. And poor Jay looked a little the worse for wear in his post-game interview.
Understatement of the year.
There's a link to a tweet with a couple of choice photographs of poor Jay Cutler that I shared in our Google Hangout that we maintain throughout the week. And I posted a couple of pictures and I was like, hey, Jay Cutler needs our help, you guys.
Yeah, things went horribly wrong. So, again, you need to take a look at these. We'll be tweeting this out on the Norse Code Twitter account. It'll also be in the show notes. You need to take a look at this picture. But I think what we're going to do is read our responses to what Jay Cutler looks like. So my first one was that Jay Cutler looks like a guy at a methadone clinic.
To me, he looks like a guy that was in a $600,000 car theft ring that just got busted up in Denver. The mugshots of the 6 ringleaders were mugshots of homeless crack addicts.
homeless crack addicts. He looks like one of those cops that has 1 day left till retirement.
Jay Cutler is the face of the opiate crisis.
It could be your family. It could be a friend. It could be a quarterback for the Dolphins.
You don't know. Jay Cutler looks like someone who was just told that he is the father on Maury. And now he has to decide whether or not the kid will be vaccinated.
Jay Cutler looks like someone who keeps borrowing money from an ever-expanding circle of people in order to pay off everyone else.
Jay Cutler looks like his dad stayed up until 1 a.m. waiting for him to come home drunk from a popular kid's party in high school.
Jay Cutler looks like a Giants fan this year.
Ooh.
Jay Cutler looks like someone who thinks he's in the middle of successfully convincing someone that his 84 Camaro with a spare tire and a different colored hood is worth $4,500.
You know, when I read that, I thought, well, that's oddly specific.
But it has a brand new differential that took like 2 weeks to install.
Look, Jay, go to autotrader.com. These things are selling for $5,500. Really, this is a steal.
Jay Cutler looks like he just got suspended for tweeting.
Jay Cutler looks like Bannon's illegitimate child.
Jay Cutler looks like he got caught escaping from a leper colony.
Ugh.
Jay Cutler looks like he mixes flour with cocaine to extend the high.
Oh.
Jay Cutler looks like he's standing in line for water in Puerto Rico.
Oh,
that's sad. That's sad.
Jay Cutler looks like he was deeply affected by the death of Tom Petty.
Jay Cutler looks like he thinks Puerto Rico is the name of the hooker he hired 3 nights ago.
Duh, it's Puerto Rico.
Come on, man.
Jay Cutler looks like he was getting charged up for a team meeting with his girlfriend in the office.
Oh. Jay Cutler
topical.
Jay Cutler looks like he just endured a Saturday afternoon at IKEA.
With no meatballs.
No meatballs. None.
Jay Cutler looks like he's been babysitting the president.
Jay Cutler looks like
That's a Bob Corker reference, by the way. That is, we are not an explicitly political podcast.
Yes. If anything, we stick to sports here.
Stick to sports. Jay Cutler looks like he just lost a fight with a surly drag queen.
And finally, Jay Cutler's fiance isn't okay with the seating arrangement 3 days before the wedding reception.
He looks beat up. That's what we're trying to say. He looks like he's had a rough night.
He looks like Al.
He looks like he's had like a rough 3 weeks. He looks like he was just hanging out with Blake Bortles for the last couple days.
He looks like someone who was retired and then forcibly not retired. Oh wait.
Aww. He could have been naked on that beach. He could still be naked on that beach. No more.
In some sense, he's always naked on that beach.
And now with that, let's go to the mailbag. Don from Ohio asks, I have a question. Why should I listen to the three of you when your combined fantasy football record is 3-12?
In the Trick League?
Just to be clear here, Mason Crosby did miss 2 extra points in the same game this week.
Yeah.
Causing somebody great consternation. Unfortunately, not one of us.
No. So
right.
we can't
use
that.
Use that as an excuse. But.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's actually going to be like part of my excuse for why I lost this week. I have one kicker on my team, Brandon McManus, and I feel like he is of good enough quality where I didn't want to just raid the waiver wire for a different kicker, and I didn't really want to give up any of my other position players, and so I just rolled into this week with no kicker, and ESPN or Yahoo Fantasy rules. Oh shit! Well, then I guess I'm out.
You have no excuse, good sir.
But I still have Brandon McManus, and I felt like keeping him was worth the penalty of not having a kicker this week in the league. And regrettably, I lost the game by less than the number of points that the opposing team's kicker scored. So I think that should just the fact that happened should save me from disqualification. I think I was sufficiently hoist by my own petard.
Something like that. I feel like it's.
But look, actually, I will save the rest of my thoughts for the other Norse Code League related question. What are your excuses?
I'm the commissioner. It doesn't matter how good or bad I do in the league. No one else wants this job, so I'm just going to keep running with it.
I have a net winning record when combining all my fantasy leagues, so suck it.
He can afford to be terrible in the one that there's no money involved in. There's nothing but pride and pain. Next question is from Kyle Slabby, who asks, any thoughts on the 7 wide receivers we seem to be having? We seem to have signed to the team right now. I figured this would be the game to give the rookie return duties to McKinnon's running back duties increased, but I guess not.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising.
For further thoughts on this, we refer to our guest, Stephen Ridley.
My jersey isn't in yet. How did we cut him?
He's still in Minnesota, by the way. He's still he hasn't flown back to Mississippi where he lives because they might still need him. So fingers crossed.
Well, maybe we can ask him what number he would have worn and then hang that one from the Raptors.
Right. I was surprised that they kept 7 receivers and then just made 2 inactive instead of merely the 1. Because both of the 2 that are inactive are competitors for the kick return job, which, Jerick McKinnon is not keeping others at bay with, at least, from our perspective. Maybe the other 2 are just so bad that it doesn't really matter. But yeah, I think it's dumb to have 7 receivers on the roster, and I think that the Vikings probably would have cut one of them to make room for Floyd. And kept Stevan Ridley on the roster. I know it's pronounced Steven. I look at the name and, Stevan. I think if it weren't for all the wide receiver injuries that we saw, I think the Vikings are trying to trade one of them and just refusing to cut one of them. So to the Giants, for example, it's not like, Rodney Adams was going to save the Giants season or anything. But they would have snatched him up, and it would have deprived the Vikings of a practice squad receiver that they may have wanted. So I think that's really the only reason. I don't think it's super smart, but it's not like someone's going to snatch up Ridley sort of in the meantime.
Next question is from Slabby, who asks, with the AP trade, can we assume that the Cardinals have perfected a Lazarus-esque machine?
If they did, they need to use it on Carson Palmer again. Yeah. Also on Chris Johnson again.
Carson Palmer has needed that for months.
Right. I think one of the best tweets was, holy crap, the Cardinals are my 2009 fantasy football team.
I prefer to think of it as a rickety Rube Goldberg machine that ends with a small child being whacked in the buttocks with a stick.
Oh. Rich Snowden asks, 2 games, 2 2-point conversions against the defense, albeit with trickery. And for the record, that was an amazing 2-point conversion.
It was incredible.
Is this just a blip or something we should worry about for this emerging trend?
Yeah, I think it's something to worry about. That incredible play, whatever, that's going to happen. But, consistently allowing 2-point conversions or consistently allowing, special team scores, it feels like it's something to worry about. But it should be noted, they are different units. It's just the regular defense out there on 2-point conversions. And it was the special teams unit out there on that trick punt. And so it's something I would think about, but I don't think it's any different than the goal line defense. The Vikings have already demonstrated they've got a pretty good goal line defense. So I guess I'm going to contradict what I just said at the beginning. I guess I'm not that worried about the 2-point conversion thing. I am a little bit worried about the special teams thing. Because, you need when the Vikings run a trick play, they run the worst one. And when they're up against one, they have no idea what to do. Danielle Hunter let up. Come on, man, just hit the dude. Now you're going from blocking a kick to tackling. It's not that different. So yeah, they need to be more aware, but I'm worried about it from the perspective of what Prefer is doing with the special teams unit. I'm not worried about the goal line defense.
Next question is from Nathan, who asks, with all the uncertainty at quarterback, should the Vikings draft a quarterback this year if someone they like is available in the 3rd round?
Yeah, absolutely. I would do that in the 3rd or 4th round. The question, it sounds like this year is going to be a bad year for quarterbacks, and it's kind of interesting because during the draft, people will always say, oh, they can wait on a quarterback, get a quarterback next year. Next year is going to be a great year for quarterbacks. And then during the year, people will always say, well, this is a pretty bad year for quarterbacks, right? And so it's it's difficult to kind of figure out what the deal is. But it seems like this year there's just not that many quarterbacks that are standing out. You could get an air raid quarterback. I know a lot of people are talking about Mason Rudolph as a potential 1st-round pick. I don't think he will be. And so maybe you could find him in the 3rd or 4th round. Baker Mayfield, a lot of people think he's too short. Plus, he did get a drunken and disorderly. And so he might not be 1st-round material, even though he's playing really well. So it is possible to get one of those guys. I doubt that, one of those guys is going to show up as a standout draft pick or anything like that. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Vikings invested in a mid-round quarterback.
Next question is from Sam, who asks, thoughts on the Vikings going for 2 to make it 18-9 in a 2-score game, and if it fails, we're still only up 7.
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
We definitely would have supported
Where was the
that.
New York Times 4th down bot on that one?
New York Times 4th down bot is broken or something. I don't know.
Whoever ran it probably got fired.
Your 4th down bot is too snarky.
That's why things are failing. Raul asks, are you pro or anti Everson Griffin's aggressiveness on the snap? On the one hand, the strip sack. On the other hand, penalty on 3rd down. Should down and distance matter to his approach?
Well, the thing is, people tend to be more aggressive on 3rd down because they know the quarterback is going to pass the ball. And so they don't have to worry about, reading the tackle, seeing if it's a run, responding appropriately. They just pin their ears back is like the phrase everyone uses. And so it's counterintuitive to suggest be less of aggressive on third down. Instead, I would say just overall, it is worth it, especially because some of those penalties are actually pretty poor penalties. I think that many of the offsides penalties that are called on Griffin are inaccurate and that he was not offsides on some of them. And that one, it seems like he was. But I think overall it's worth it. Free first downs are frustrating, of course. They're not always free first downs. But it sucks when it doesn't work out. But Griffin also has a sack in every game so far, so I'm not going to ask him to change his approach at all.
Well, and I think there's a mental element to it for offensive linemen that are stuck facing him. Like, oh my God, this guy is going to come at me like a hungry bear, no matter what down it is and no matter how bad the refs are screwing him. And at some point, that's got to get into your head, no matter how much of a professional you are.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, especially if you're like struggling already, and he has a play where it looks like his speed is just hit another level, even if it ends up being a penalty, that's definitely going to get in your head.
Next question is, this is a good one from Hayden, who asks, what is the best midnight snack, or in Arif's case, 3 a.m. snack?
It's really like a depends on your mood thing. I like fried chicken, though.
Fried chicken at 3 a.m.?
Absolutely.
I like how I'm simple
so for me,
on that. Dusty, what's yours?
So for me, there's a couple different ways it can go. There's two different types of like late night snacks for me. One of them is when I get home from work super late. You know, of course, working in the beverage industry, I frequently get home at 3 a.m. or later. And with the glory of Uber Eats and late night taco shops in Denver, I can get tacos delivered to me as late as 4 a.m.
That's incredible.
So if I'm confident that I'm going to be awake long enough for the Uber Eats driver to deliver my tacos, then half a dozen tacos is not a bad choice. The other situation for me is like when I've already fallen asleep and then I wake up in the middle of the night, like after a food dream, and maybe I didn't eat enough food during the day and I'm just like ravenously hungry. And then my go-to is just like whatever I can functionally instantly consume. And in that case, it's usually like cheese and crackers and jam.
All mixed together and crumbled, not in any sort of semblance of order.
There's one thing I want to mention is that the blog series seats, which I've mentioned a couple of times on the show, it does have like this 5-minute mac and cheese that you can make even while you're drunk. And I've tried it and it's amazing and it's super simple. I'm going to put it in the show notes. And it is also a pretty good midnight snack, although that approach is meal size. Still, the leftovers are good too.
Yeah.
Honorable mention goes to cacio e pepe and fried rice.
Oh, his cacio e pepe video is great. So yeah.
Yeah. I like how I have the two low rent answers. If I'm in the situation that Dusty mentioned,
cacio e pepe is pretty low rent once you've made it. Like
the name is fancy, but twice. Yeah.
Well,
it's
going
just
with
noodles in a hot pan with cheese. Like
that's it.
If I wake up in a situation where it's like I'm not going to be able to fall back asleep, I should probably eat something. I grab a Pop-Tart because that's my level of culinary expertise. But if I'm driving home from when I was DJing, especially when I'd get done with events, we have the red pepper in Grand Forks, and if I'm willing to deal with the consequences of eating red pepper late at night, if I'm willing to deal with the consequences of that in the morning and the afternoon the next day, then red pepper is the choice of champions.
Provided there is Pepto-Bismol at home, red pepper is never a bad choice.
And even then, it's kind of iffy, but still delicious. So good. Next question is from Brian Bjorgen, who asks, does Sam's knee issue seem to like it's setting up a perfect storm for Teddy's return to you?
I always get worried because this feels way too much like a story, right? Like Hollywood wrote it. And like I think that's going to drive some decisions, and maybe it shouldn't. But yeah, definitely that's what it sounds like, right? Like, oh, Teddy's going to be the true savior after we thought we had a savior, and he turns out to be a false prophet because of his knee, not because of any character flaw. And
unlike most false prophets.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're intentionally lying. Sad,
okay, but to be fair, Adrian Peterson just went from a saint to a cardinal.
Heyo.
Yeah, so Pope is next, according to Twitter.
Is that
okay? So this is not a perfect setup for Teddy's return, and we've talked about this earlier in the show. It's actually a perfect setup for the introduction of Kyle Sluter.
Oh my God!
His
option quarterback Kyle Sluter.
Laser arm.
Exactly.
I'd like to see him on some Wildcat packages, maybe instead of McKinnon.
He will save us week 12 onward after we are quarterback free. After he has the last 2 knees left on the Vikings.
Like the last 2 total or the last 2 together?
The last matching pair.
Question is, was that the best end zone celebration this year? Referring to the Duck, Duck, Goose.
No. It's Duck, Duck, Gray Duck, and you know it is.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Absolutely know it is. You're just doing this to stir controversy.
Stick to sports. This is Duck, Duck, Gray. God damn it. I just like that as a catch-all for everything. Sorry.
The story by Alex Perrine on Deadspin pretty much nailed it. Like the best part about Duck Duck Gray Duck was the kid who got in trouble in preschool for saying poopy duck.
Agreed. Also in the comments, really great mention was you've never truly played Duck Duck Gray Duck until you get the guy who you called Green Duck to run into the actual Gray Duck. Fantastic.
Duck on duck collision.
Yeah, fantastic. But yes, the Deadspin article hits essentially every note as to why it should be called Duck Duck Gray Duck. You are wrong, and you don't want kids to have as much fun as they could have.
You're absolutely right. If I've learned anything as a father, it's that I don't want kids to have as much fun as they want. Next question is is Rudolph good?
He's not bad. I'll say that. How about that?
There is that.
He's no Zach Ertz, but he's fine.
That's our level of good. Tim Clark from Daily Norseman asks, how vindicated does Arif feel with McKinnon's success?
Pretty vindicated, but you can't really dance on one game, right? That'd be like saying the Bradford Truthers were right after one game. I mean, I guess they were. Maybe a bad example. The Keenum Truthers were right after the Tampa Bay game. So I still believe, of course, that Jerick McKinnon's a good running back, and it is great that I have multiple rants recorded in audio, in my take archive, as it were, defending Jerick McKinnon as a running back, and then for him to have that game immediately after I rant about it. That's good. But I mean, it is one game, so hopefully he'll continue it.
Why haven't they traded Treadwell for a ham sandwich?
Because, they think that the things that they thought he had when he was a draftee are still there, and they just need to, unravel them, or reveal them, rather, not unravel them. That would be bad.
I think the best thing that was written on that was that teams aren't going to trade for Treadwell for all the reasons you don't like him.
Yeah,
okay, but the real reason is that there's still at least one person capable of playing wide receiver for the Giants. And once that person is injured, then they will have literally no choice but to trade for Laquan Treadwell.
I'm trying to figure out who that person is. Is this Sterling Shepard? Is it Paul Perkins, the running back?
Or are you talking about bringing Victor Cruz in from the dead?
Yeah, the ghost of Victor Cruz. I think once Paul Perkins goes down, then we can definitely get a 5th round and a conditional pick for Laquan Treadwell, which I think would be a trade that favors us.
Oh, hey, that's basically just getting Stephon Diggs for Laquan. That's great. That's how that works, right?
Yeah, let's go with that. Will Spielman abandon the Wayne's experience next year?
Maybe. I don't have any strong thoughts on this. I think the Vikings think much more highly of Wayne's than I do.
Yeah. Andrew Roth asks, are any of your jobs as fantasy GM in jeopardy? No, because nobody wants this damn job.
This is the worst fantasy job.
Yeah.
The worst.
I like to think of myself as the Leslie Frazier of fantasy GMs. I am liked by my players, but consistently make the worst possible personnel decisions whenever I have a choice point.
You accidentally disqualified yourself from the league.
Very Frazier-esque.
Well,
okay, so no, I didn't disqualify myself from the league. I think
just the game.
The rule is that you have to have a kicker on your team. Not that you have to
starting.
No, the rule is definitely you have to play the kicker.
Yeah.
I played my kicker. He just had a bye.
On bye and he started for you. I think that doesn't count.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to be up to the commissioner. I hear he's a hard.
I still lost, and I lost in a very ignominious way. And I will take this to the highest court in the land.
That appears to be me, and
or whatever that
you still lost. So in the end, it doesn't. As it turns out, in the end, it didn't really matter. Just like the league, but still. From Don from Ohio, who asks, between Arif, Dusty, and myself, who do I select to help me win a chili contest, and what would you make?
There's a lot of information missing from this that I think is important to the contest. Like where is it being held? Who are the judges? That sort of thing.
Are you asking if it's going to be at altitude? Is that what you're asking?
Well, he's asking, whether or not it's going to be in Texas, because they were particular about like what you can put in Chile. They have like strong opinions about like beans, for example, and other people strong opinions about like tomatoes in Chile. That's significant information to have.
Well, we could even start with that. Do you believe in having beans and tomatoes in your chili?
Yes.
Well, so here's the reason I ask, of course, is because I would make some kind of like highfalutin chili. It would probably be too exotic for the taste of some chili cook-off judges. Like I would never get very far with this recipe in Texas, but I would probably do some kind of like almost Asian style, like brisket heavy chili, or some kind of like shredded meat heavy chili with lots of.
I love brisket is one of my two choices for chili meat. The other one being short rib. I'm fine with that. The Asian style, man. Yeah, you're losing.
Brisket, okay, brisket, short rib, lots of Korean gochujang sauce, like their fermented bean paste barbecue sauce kind of situation. Red beans, a bottle of my favorite Colorado stout beer, and mystery other adjuncts for obviously smoked paprika, probably the contents of a can of Chipotle chilies, like all the sauce and the chilies probably blended up for smoothness. But it'll taste really good and be like really smoky and have lots of depth of flavor, but it will not taste like anyone else's chili.
Yeah, I guess that could be good or bad. I will say that for a while we did make chili once a week for our Dungeons and Dragons game, and because it's us, we went pretty all out. So we would we'd get a poblano, we would like smoke it through and through on a grill, and put that in. We'd obviously put chipotles with adobo sauce in. We put dried anchos in there.
That is just like trying too hard. Like I tend to subscribe to the Alton Brown chili making theory in general, that
it is not hard to burn a poblano pepper.
Well, no, but you can also purchase like pre-smoked chilies in a can and throw those in, and it takes 3 seconds. Like chili ingredients should not really require much pre-preparation in my mind.
I totally disagree, especially if you're in a chili contest. You should put some effort into your chili contest.
Yeah, one of those things where the fresher the ingredients, that you can feel like you can taste it.
Yeah,
I think that the way you cook chili, if you actually let it sit on the burner all day, I feel like the real test of a quality chili is the creativity and the cohesive deliciousness of whatever ingredients are pretty much already ready to go. I mean, do you soak your beans for your chili?
No, hold on. If you're going to talk about Alton Brown, remember that he like pre-roasted his short ribs, then put them in the fridge so they would gelatinize and their gelatin structure would change so that it would hold better in the. That's a lot of work. Good work.
Okay, but you can just buy a can of Chipotle's and adobo sauce.
It should just be simple based on what Alton Brown says. And I have no idea what you said because I was talking over you.
Well, you can just purchase a can of Chipotle chilies and adobo sauce and get that exact same effect by peeling the top off.
No, because the poblano peppers are different after you burn them. Like, it's not just for a quote-unquote smoke flavor. The poblanos are substantially different when you burn them. Like, yeah, obviously we've got a smokiness flavor from the smoked paprika and a smokiness flavor from the adobo sauce. Like, that's all true. It can end up being pretty smoky. You can also throw pre-smoked bacon in there. I don't have an issue with that. The poblano pepper, like, is just different and it tastes different, and you can taste the difference when you put it in there. Like, it's not just adding a smoke element to it.
This is where our chilies would diverge. I think we would end up with a similarly gelatinized chili if I used fermented bean paste and adobo sauce, and you wasted half a day.
According to your rule of simplicity, you would also throw in like some powdered gelatin and be like, well, that'll firm things up.
Yeah, why not?
I'm reminded of the tweet.
I personally would use cornstarch and not gelatin. Or if I wanted to be
glossy
really
like candy, come on, man.
If I wanted to be really fancy, I would go into my modernist kitchen and maybe get some agar or soy lecithin, which I actually keep in powder form for thickening things when cornstarch or tapioca starch or whatever else are not appropriate, and add those if I wanted to experiment with a perfectly thick chili, but. That's going pretty far afield.
If I may interject, I'm reminded of the tweet that Arif sent out last night, where Arif said something along the lines of, please subscribe to these shows. I need to feed my family. And someone responds with, if you listen to the show, you know that Arif eats better than your family. Kudos to you, sir.
Fair. That's a good point. Good point. I will also say burning a poblano takes no time, so I'm going to throw that in there.
I end up tossing in a whole mess of peppers, and I believe in a good, healthy mix of fresh vegetables to toss in, but I tend to turn it into more of a just everything I have in the kitchen sort of a chili, which turns out to be delicious. But I believe heavily in serranos and jalapenos and bell peppers on top of that, and a couple of different types of tomato and two or three different types of beans with it. So I'm a bean and tomato person. I don't think I would go full crazy Korean chili, but that would be interesting to taste anyway.
Well, I will. So I think what we can all take away from this is that if you want the voice of experience, Arif is probably the way to go. But my chili.
But if you want someone who's very inconsistent about when it's okay to cross cultures with Asian food, she's Dusty.
Or just in general, not even about food.
That's a function of like all my cooking. Like that is a statement that is generally true even outside the realm of chili.
I'm just remembering like Korean tacos are terrible. Anyway, I make a Korean chili.
Whatever, man. Gochujang is delicious. I put it on toast. Right? Okay, I did that once.
Oh, so if it tastes good, it doesn't. Okay, cool. Now that we know.
Wait, is that sort of on the same lines as like the water in the cereal? Is that where we're at?
No, that's
more like a. Yeah, no, the water on cereal is an unspeakable crime. Gochujang on toast is more like a Vegemite on toast, I think.
Except probably a lot better.
Ugh.
Yeah, except it tastes better, yeah.
Yeah, Vegemite tastes like death. Final question is also from Don from Ohio, who asks, should I purchase DDP Yoga? Which, before the show, Dusty didn't even know was a thing.
I did not.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
I suggest you Google it.
You can Google it, or I can tell you, because I actually do it. And this isn't a paid, like, plug or anything. I actually do the DDP yoga thing.
Diamond Dallas Page?
Yes. So,
what?
Yeah, I am a 6'5", 300-pound, 34-year-old who is ridiculously flexible, and it has made it so that my core and my back is strong enough to be able to drive and like function like an adult. It's okay. It's worked for me as far as like building strength, not necessarily like losing weight, but it's worked for me anyway. And it's confused the hell out of people whenever I like mention, oh yeah, I've done yoga for like years. Really?
So I clicked on this article. While Page's big barky persona may not appeal to everyone, his program is surprisingly practical and well thought out.
Yeah, it's not difficult to do. And the biggest thing I got out of it was the yoga breathing thing, which I've been able to apply to both stressful experiences or like I play competitive darts because I don't want to do anything else with my life apparently other than podcast and work. And so I play darts, and if I'm in my head or whatever, just I do some of the breathing techniques that have been mentioned in the book and in the DVD, and it makes sense. It like calms me down, and it's a bit like that scene in the Kevin Costner baseball movie when he's throwing the perfect game, where it's just clear the chamber and it just clears it out. So
all right.
Yeah, I've had success with it, but I don't think you're going to lose any real weight with it. You're probably better off doing just about anything else. He does have a bit of a food recommendation thing in there, which fine, but it's not worth it. You have too much to live for. You don't need to go down that road, son. It's pretty dark, but it's not a bad idea for guys to be more flexible and to get stronger. And the last time that Dusty came to visit, or one of the last times Dusty came to visit North Dakota, I had just destroyed my back because I had lost something. In total, I lost 125 pounds over the span of like a year. But I, at that point, had only lost like 75, but my back had collapsed because I didn't have any muscle back there. It was just fat. So when I lost all the weight, it all just like kind of collapsed and made me a just big bag of miserable. And I had to drive Dusty home one night that he visited, and I was like dying in the car. Like, I'll drive you home, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna make it home. I might be in rough shape. So. But yeah, I've had success with the program. They are not paying us to say this because this is one of those things that people like advertise for. But I don't know. I had success with it, and I don't think you're going to lose any weight. But it's not a bad thing to have in the regimen to have available to you. Surprisingly practical.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
That was a more in-depth answer about the benefits of Diamond Dallas Page Yoga than I thought we would get.
So you guys can go off on Asian chili, and I can sit there and tell you how to feel the bang, as it were, which you feel stupid a bit, but whatever.
Okay.
So
well, that's the show.
That is going to be it. Dusty's computer has decided to be an enemy combatant once again and not let us finish with him. So that's going to be it for the show. Arif, do you have anything to plug?
Yeah, nothing really. I'll be writing stuff about Case Keenum probably at zonecovers.com. A lot of people have been asking me about my Laquan Treadwell article, which I have not published yet. I just kind of got sidetracked. And so hopefully I'll get some work on that too. Good
deal. In a few days, we will be posting the Packers preview, and we can look forward to that. Are we bringing back Mr. Justice? Is that what we're going to be doing?
Not this time. Sorry, Justice fans. Sorry, Justice. We're just going to see if we can get a Skype call to work in one go, and so I'm inviting on a different guest. We'll see.
We're trying something new this time. We're trying for a Skype call that works. So that kind of eliminated justice, as it turns out. Darn shame.
The LVP.
LVP. So you can look forward to that coming out in the next few days. So thank you guys so much for listening. Again, hope you appreciated the 3-man pod. We do like to do this every once in a while, so hope you enjoyed it. Moving forward, we got the game coming up next Sunday. So for Arif, for Dusty, my name is James. Thank you so much for listening, and demand excellence. Demand Norse Code.
Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, or wherever else fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, who can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. Our intrepid producer and occasional co-host James Pagachnik can be found on Twitter at Big Mono or curating the official Norse Code Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. I'm your host with a firm grasp of the obvious, Dusty O'Connell, and my name is my handle on Twitter. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, your one-time donation can be made at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Please visit our website, NorseCodePodcast.com, where you'll find links to our Facebook and YouTube pages, along with the episode archive and some other good stuff. And any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be emailed to NorseCodePodcast@gmail.com. And on behalf of the entire Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.